which prioritized creation of, they created an agricultural transformation office in the office of the president to oversee this transformation in the sector. And they had the Big Four agenda, in which also we know that there was fertilizer subsidy was prioritized. In the Kibaki era, in that transformation agenda, we had the beginning of the 2030 vision, the strategy for revitalizing agriculture, the agricultural sector development strategy as key strategies for operationalizing or transforming the ag sector. So in tackling policy constraints, which we at Tegemeo focus on, tackling policy constraints around physical policies, food security, access, infrastructure, tackling those constraints is key to advancing Kenya's transformation, agriculture sector transformation. So our study, we focus on the political economy because in our view, this is a binding constraint. And so this paper will examine the political economy factors that help or hinder progress towards the desired goals, or outcomes. And it identifies where necessary policy reforms are more or less feasible because of the political economy constraints or issues therein. So we've used the political economy value chain analytical framework where we compared 3 distinct value chains and we examined the degree to which political economy factors were influencing the decisions or lack of decisions in those value chain issues, and implementation or lack of implementation and around. So, so when we pay attention to the political economy factors, then we ensure that policy recommendations can then be, aligned, or we can see how well they are aligned with the political feasibility, right? So we don't want to remain blind to the political economy factors or issues that affect what we continually work in as Tegemeo. So we derived a political framework by reviewing different strands of political economy, scholarship and value chain analysis, where we merged those 2 schools of thought, including the PPPC, and I'll be showing you that framework shortly. And so we've combined features of conventional agricultural value chain analysis and traditions in the political economy discipline. So that framework will consider the role of interests, ideas, institutions, and acknowledges the power asymmetries within the value chains and the political system, right? And with insights from the political settlement theory. It also recognizes the role of bureaucratic capacities and autonomy. Yeah? So, So we'll skip that. It's just about the political framework. So, first, the first step is that we went out and identified the range of value chain actors in these 3 value chains in the economy, in the system that we want to study, the system and the preferences and the distribution of power in those value chains among the participants or players in that space. And then we also recognize that there are mediating factors, two important mediating factors that shape the likelihood that the value chain actor preferences will reach the policy makers, because within value chains we have interests, we have preferences that they wish to reach the policy makers and decision makers. And so the mediating mechanisms, we have one, the collective action, using formal and informal institutions, where we have lobbying bodies and associations, and the balance of power there within that value chain, which governs then the preferences that will be advocated for or lobbied for. And then we also have the We have also the other mediating one is where you use policy, they try to influence, the value chain actors will try to influence policy decisions by involving or having political leverage. So where you decide that, you know, you may have some political leverage either by this one of the players is an important is in the political elite system. So there's direct involvement of politicians in the value chain, or even due to the value chain's importance in the political system, maybe because of the numbers involved in that value chain or the geographical placement and things like that. So those two are important mediating factors. And then there's also the horizontal political settlements. This is one way through which we know political settlements. Decisions are made where the decisions about distribution of power across the different elite factions within government are settled. So we have party leaders, politicians. Sometimes it may include traditional leaders, religious leaders, and even the army. And so in this kind of settlement, we find some will be included and others will be excluded. And those who will be included would depend on, you know, the partisanship, the policy goals, and even materialistic or economic interests. So you find that that kind of settlement system also exists. The other factor or the other issue here within the political economy is the bureaucracies, the ministries, the agencies, and the parastatals. And we know that to be effective in policy implementation, bureaucracies need adequate staffing, adequate budgets, but also sufficient autonomy from the political class is essential. And we know that the bureaucracy, but the capacity and autonomy is affected by how important a commodity is for now, the horizontal political settlement. So that will affect how your preferences or what you're lobbying for is taken up, because then it will affect how much resources you're getting or how much capacity you have and how much political autonomy you have. And also, when you have a whole range of ministries or agencies commanding a mandate for any political dimension or policy dimension, may it be, food safety or other infrastructure, or other things that affect our value chains or their transformation, you find that the more ministries or agencies that are involved in that, the larger the coordination challenge, and then the longer it takes to respond to policy priorities. This is the framework, a graphical representation of the framework. Starting down there with the economic system, that's the value chain. So you have a distribution of economic power across different value chain players. They are producers, traders, processors, exporters, and they form associations and groupings to lobby that mediating mechanism, or they can use political leverage through which they advocate for or lobby for their interests or preferences. And through that, then we see here at the political system, we have the bureaucratic actors, the agencies, the parastatals, the ministries, and also we have the political settlement. So those are key in the political system then, economy, that affects the way decisions are made and the way policies are made or implemented, the resources allocated, the autonomy and things like that. And that then affects the economic opportunities and the incentives that are created within the value chains. So as I said, first we started with the mapping of the players within the value chains. We worked on 3 value chains because we wanted to compare and contrast and get an understanding on how this political economy affects each one of them, but also across the 3 of them. I've just showing one of them, the beef value chain. And as you can see, in the beef value chain, we have the private sector players, we have the civil society and business organizations, bureaucratic actors. You can see so many there listed. We have the county government, we have the national government, we have several ministries there listed, implementing various parts and aspects of regulatory and taxation and food safety and other aspects of the value chain that are important. And then we have the political actors there, where you have the parliamentarians, the presidency. There, this study, I think I will say later, was from 2013 and 2022. And at that point, we have the Agricultural Transformation Office. We also have at the county level, the COG, the JASCOM, and we also have the MCAs and others. And lastly, the level of government, the central and all that. So we have all these players in that value chain. And for each value chain, if you scan for our policy note on that, you'll find that there are similar ones for fruits and vegetables and for sorghum. So as I said, our study was spanning 2013 to 2022, capturing the political economy dynamics under the Kenya's new constitution and the institutional landscape. And we drew from 3 sources of data: literature review, from the political economy, the value chains. We also did several focus group discussions with experts in each of the value chains to help us narrow down on the important policy issues within each value chain. And then we undertook thereafter key informant interviews, with central government, private sector, civil, all those that you've seen there. I just say that we were based in Nairobi. We didn't really interview farmers because of issues with time, but we believe that the range of people or actors that we interviewed gave us a pretty good understanding of what is going on in each of the value chains. So those are the selected value chains, and we selected those up front. They were not selected after the interviews, but before. And we know beef and sorghum are important and central to addressing drought and improving resilience in more vulnerable communities, and the fruits and vegetables, the micronutrients, but also in terms of forex exchange and things like that. And so you can see where they span. And so this just demonstrates that these are very important value chains that were selected. And in these value chains, all of them, productivity is a challenge, as has been spoken before in the previous speakers. We have insufficient supply to meet, supply within to meet domestic consumer demand, and consumer demand has required increased imports in all of the value chains. That's just a profile of each of them. Please allow me to skip that. As I said, it's in you scan our policy notes, and you'll be able to find more of this information. So that from our key informant interviews, these are the cross-cutting policy issues that emerged, for each value chain, but we say they are all for cross-cutting. So we have the fiscal policies on sales rates, import taxes, excise duties, and export levies. We have food safety issues, input access issues and costs, and you know that the previous speakers have also spoken about that, and also infrastructural investments, all key policy issues affecting the transformation and growth in these value chains. Of course, others were excluded, but by adopting that multi-stage engagement with literature, FGDs, and then in-depth interviews, we believe that the policy issues are widely considered to be priority issues in these value chains. So in application of this value chain, to understand the progress or the bottlenecks in these value chains, in getting this transformation that we so much desire, we then used this framework. In each value chain, we examined the political power, the mediating mechanisms, the horizontal settlement system, and the bureaucratic actors in each value chain. So there's a lot to present, and really within the given time, it's hard to go to each value chain, so please allow me, and please go to the policy note, but just allow me to talk about the beef value chain, which is the first column here. So on the economic power, we found that economic power of actors varied across the three value chains. In the beef value chain, we find that pastoralists contribute a large contribution to the beef supply. However, the economic power lying with the value chain is concentrated amongst the traders and the brokers. I think many people here who've studied that value chain understand that. But I'll just talk about economic power. Let me just mention that in the sorghum, we see extreme concentration of power dominated at the processing level with the East African Breweries Limited, while in the flowers, fruits and vegetables, we have large farms in the export, with a heavy market, having a heavy market concentration there. But let me concentrate on the beef. So we also have the Kenya Meat Commission, which is an aggregator, but we also found that though they do a little bit for the pastoralists who, as we have said, are a large contribution of the beef supply, they mainly processing beef from the large ranches, especially for those that's export-oriented. I think they have a license for exporting, I think they're the ones holding that license, and so they become a very important player there. So that's on economic power. On the mediating mechanisms, we found that in the beef value chain, there's lack of horizontal integration. Is dominated by informal actors, and this has worked against the creation of a strong lobby group in the beef value chain. And even then, there are several of them, but we found that none of the organizations was viewed to be adequately addressing the interests or representing the interests of the pastoralist communities. But most recently, we have seen formation of the pastoralist parliamentary group, providing research and advice to members of parliament on pastoralist issues. We also have the Frontiers County Development Council providing advice for county governments and senators. So these are emerging strongly, but still we see because of that lack of horizontal integration, there's a lot of formal actors in that value chain. In the mediating mechanisms, we find that in the beef value chain, there are associations, we say they don't always speak from the same voice. For example, in the feedlot policy, where feedlots are being touted or fronted as a signature, it is a signature government intervention, I think in the previous Jubilee government and probably even this one. So pastoralists, intervention in pastoral areas to deal with the drought issues in the ASA areas. But other views, so there's a lot of emphasis on that, but other views are it's expensive and a niche initiative, and it is in itself is insufficient without attention to other issues that affect the value standards, traceability, tariffs, and food safety. And so there you find different voices, which also affect the speed in which they propose or the speed in which issues are resolved or prioritized for the pastoralists. Powerful politicians also we find involved in ranching, and this has, of course, potential for political interference in the issues and in those mediating mechanisms. What gets to the policy makers up there, political economy up there. And then also, because ranching is a extensive production system, taking up large portions of land, we find that some of those in that would need political connections in order to ward off other interests. In this value chain, maybe we can talk a little bit about the horizontal settlement in general. So the horizontal settlement, we said, is the, how whether you're in the inner circle or you've been pushed out because of either your partisan or your opposing or your whatever interest it is, whether you know what's happening right currently. That is a horizontal settlement, an example of the horizontal settlement. So in Kenya, in the ag sector, we have a history of politicians with close ties to business. So we find that we can get direct interference where you have agencies being instructed to prioritize an issue or to re-examine, regulations within a sector. Or indirectly, you can find restructuring of agencies, which may only be to serve political ends or they are politically motivated. And then there's also fractionalization. The example within that period that we studied was the Building Bridges initiative, where we saw opponents relegated to the outer settlement circle of the ruling. That's in a circle of political decision making. But all this, we see that delays. So when something like that happens, we see a lot of delays in passage of legislative acts, but large backlog for several bills in livestock, in crops, and in agriculture in general. We also saw the horizontal settlement issue within the Kenya Meat Commission, where there were issues raised as it was being transferred to the Kenya Defence Forces, and that was opposed in court. But we know that the transfer was challenged, but it was only reversed in the next government. And maybe in that other government there was some political interests, and so you see that playing out under the Kenya Meat Commission. In sorghum, maybe I was going to say, but we're not studying sorghum, where you find, raising in sorghum excise duty, which is of interest maybe to the Kenya Revenue Agency, supported the Treasury, but parliamentarians would not allow that to happen during an election year. So you can see that kind of, in the bureaucracy, we have, in the food safety, we see that, okay, in the bureaucratic actors, you may find a lot of government agencies working on, in responsible for issues, and we find that the challenges would be in coordination, horizontal across the ministries, and vertically between the county and the central government. In the beef value chain, we have the veterinary and disease controls are devolved functions, but you find that counties are underinvesting in this. There are limited resources, and there's also a lack of inter-county cooperation across the porous borders, and that poses a challenge in the beef value chain. Also, we have overlaps in functions between the ministries of agriculture and health, over food safety issues, which creates some policy confusion. For example, transport of cattle as a food safety issue, that's in the department. Cattle from origin to the market, Department of Veterinary within Ministry of Agriculture, but then from the butchery to the consumer, we have the Ministry of Health in charge of those issues. And this has led to drafting of, various bills to coordinate these things. And of course that is, and these are still bills which were not even passed in the previous government because of the BBI. Remember that confusion that was created there. So what is the policy relevance? Again, I'm going to, these are cross-cutting issues across the three value chains, and I can just say, maybe what I wanted to say is that eventually what we did, we had tables like this across value chain specific issues, policy issues, the required response, and we talked about, the political feasibility given the political issues there, and all those that I have talked about, and then the interventions that we can take to make it maybe go faster. Or to make it more feasible. So I've just taken a few cross-cutting issues. One is the multiple cess. And we think that the political feasibility of this is medium because it requires concurrence. This is a revenue-generating source for the county. So for them to agree, you need governors and MCAs across all those counties where, for example, beef cattle and meat passes through. So you'll find that may take longer because, that's a source of internally generated. And then we have given interventions. I'm seeing my time is going, so please I'll refer you to the policy note. Just wanted to give you a flavor of what it would look like to undertake a political economy study within Tegemeo, where we deal a lot with policy matters. The other issue is of market infrastructure. So the required response is increased allocation for infrastructure that affects food safety for the poor. Talked about Wakulima market for fruits and vegetables. And we also talk about Burma market where most of our meat passes through, and Dagoretti. So there are food safety issues there. Sanitation, drainage, electricity, stalls. And we think that political feasibility for getting this market infrastructure is low. There's continued confusion, the feasibility, continued confusion of who's responsible. Then, we know like now, things have also changed with this present government. There's also little demand from the low-income consumers for food safety. And the KRA then was collecting, had targets to collect revenue, and it was based on the traders' numbers. I think even the county governments, it's based on how many you collect revenue from. It's not about food safety. For example, you know there's an issue on Wakulima market, currently serves over 9,000 traders daily. Do you know how many it was meant to serve in 1966 when it was created? 300 only traders. So you can see the issues there. So we think the political feasibility is low. The conclusions that we can have are mainly broad-based, just talking about many value chain studies, primarily focusing on economic activities, how they are structured and the policies needed to improve productivity. But there is some weakness there that we identified, weakness on governance, and it's silent on political economy issues, these kind of studies. And so failing to examine the lobbying influence, the strategies that various industry players use, proximity between business and the state, varies between value chain elites and all that, and the bottlenecks then brought about by public administration. We think these are important issues that need to be taken care of. And by comparing those three distinct value chains, we now see the reasons for decisions or non-decisions, implementation or non-implementation, and we can take action based on how.
Kamau and your colleagues. So please let's keep to the time. It's 20 minutes. Professor Milu Muyanga from Michigan State University on commercialized farms driving agricultural transformation in rural Kenya. This is very interesting because we know that most of the farmers in this country are smallholder farmers. So this is a very interesting question. So how much are commercialized farms, maybe even what does that mean, what does it entail, driving agricultural transformation in rural Kenya? I'm looking forward really to hear Prof's ideas on this. Karibu sana. Welcome, Professor Muyanga. 20 minutes.
Yes. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I was at the back there. I could see some of you, but I would make it very energetic for you, so I don't want to see people appreciating the sumptuous meal that we had. Great. I'm here to present this work on, that's the title, Commercialized Farmers Driving in Kenya. And I'm making this presentation on on my own behalf and on that of my other co-authors there, John Olwande, who is in the house, Joseph Opio from Tegemeo, also in the house, and Professor Thomas Jen, who couldn't be with us today. Great. Let me open now to operate this gadget. It's not working. Am I touching the wrong button, Professor? Yes, sometimes back it usually works that way, but anyway, I can just use this one, it's fine. Yeah. But I may need to be pointing from time to time. I think when I went to school, I was told there were two types of farms. You know, the smallholder farmers and the large commercialized farms. But with time, we are seeing another type of, farming group coming up. And these are the medium-scale farms. They are a little bit different from the smallholder farmers in terms of like land sizes and all that, and how they manage their farms. And also very different from the large commercialized farms that are run by managers, with dogs out there. You cannot get in there, and all that. So we have this group, which is very similar to smallholder farmers. Why? Because they are just family managed like smallholder farmers. People go to these social events together, churches, burials and all that. As I said, very different from large and commercialized farms. Then what we realize is also that, yes, we have the smallholder farmers, but it's not an homogeneous group. It's also differentiated. We have some who are commercialized and others who are not commercialized. Of course, if you have a smallholder farmer who is running a farm, 1 acre of tomatoes, that's commercialized by our standards. Or maybe he has invested in maybe greenhouse. That's some level of commercialization there. So what we really don't know is the impacts of these commercialized farms on the thousands of smallholder farmers who are not commercialized around them. And this study was actually set to kind of, first of all, understand the characteristics of the commercialized small-scale and medium-scale farms, and also understand whether there are spillovers running from the commercialized farms, be they small or medium, running to small non-commercialized farms. And the third one is just coming up with distilling some policy recommendations for the county government and the national government's programming. Great. First of all, let's just start with the definitions. I know when I talk about smallholder farms or that, people may not understand what I mean. But in this study, we defined smallholder farmers as those farms less than 3 hectares, operating less than 3 hectares. While medium-scale farms in this study are defined as farms which are greater than 3 hectares to 50 hectares. And when you talk about commercialized farms, we are talking about those farmers who grow, specifically aiming to sell their produce in the market. Of course, we had a lot of discussion around that kind of definition, but from where I come from, I know there are some farmers who grow their crops, not with the intention of selling, but eventually we end up seeing them in the market selling. Sometimes I just tend to say they are selling their food, because later in the year, you see them going back to the market to buy the same grain, this time at a higher price. So in other words, they're just kind of sinking their resources. Then we have another group of medium-scale farms we are defining as stepping up farmers. These are farmers who started as smaller farmers, started growing crops, made a profit, reinvested in land, and expanded their scale of production to enter to medium-scale farming. Then you have another group, which I would think most of us are in this room, who made their money outside there, and now are getting into farming. I know some of them are in this house. They are getting into the farming directly as medium-scale farmers. That's the group we are calling stepping in. Great. These were our studied counties. We went by the FTF regions. We had the west, southeastern, northern, arid, and then we further categorized them using the Tegemeo categorization of these ecological zones. Western Transitional, where we have Bungoma, Kakamega, Western Lowlands, Busia, Homa Bay, Siaya, Western Islands, Kisii, Lowlands, Eastern, Kitui, Makueni, Taita Taveta. And then you can see the northern arid districts there, counties there. Then in terms of the counties that we selected Kakamega in the Western Transitional. In Western Lowlands, we selected Kisumu. All this was just purposive kind of a selection. Kisii, we left that one out simply because of budgetary constraint plus, land sizes have become so tiny. In Kisii, you cannot find a medium-scale farm. There are very few in Kisii. And then in the Eastern Lowlands, we had Makueni and Taita Taveta. Then this is our sample. You can see the first column there, the categorization that I talked about. Small scale, not commercialized. Small scale, commercialized, then the medium scale, stepping up and stepping in. That was our sample distribution in the third column. And then we also tried comparing that definition of ours, of those ones who grow purposely to go and sell their crops in the market, and the ones who grow for consumption. And you can see, there is some similarity when we use household commercialization index and exactly what these farmers are selling. Because as you can see, the ones who are saying they are not commercialized, they were selling 13% of their farm output. But you can see the others who are commercial, either the small or medium scale, they were selling most of their crops in the market. And then I think there is another thing I wanted to point out here. Yeah, we also try to check in terms of stepping in, basically in all these categories, whether the farmers had moved, because sometimes when you want to expand your scale production, you may be forced to move to where the land is. We really want to know, are these people moving and finding land elsewhere? And as you can see, actually the ones who are stepping in are to move from maybe one income in Nairobi, and then you move in another district, to go and start your medium scale farming. So 47% of them had migrated to the counties where they are doing their farming. So the first objective, understanding who these commercialized small scale and medium scale are, and we have some statistics there. In terms of demographics, you can see, the differences maybe not very much when it comes to the age of the household, headships, whether male or female. But one thing I would want to find out here is farming experience and education of the household head. And as you can see with the education, 12 years average, which means very high. And some of those guys I said they are here, Muyaki, these are people with university degrees, 12 years and above. Great. Then in terms of land ownership, there are also some highlights I would want to make here. You can see, we asked also the amount of land they had when they started farming. You can see most of the smaller farmers started at 0.4, 0.4, when the medium started with an average of 1.4, median, and 1.4, depending on whether stepping up or stepping in. Then another highlight which I would want to make there is about the amount of land that rendered in, average. And you can see all those farmers who are in the medium scale category had rendered, I would call it substantial, depending on the landholding sizes right now in Kenya. The one who was stepping up, at least they had some reasonable land. They rendered in 3.4 acres, the hectares. Then the ones who were stepping in, 1.7 hectares. Then you can also see the ones who had purchased land in the last 10 years. You can see it's just the medium scale farms, higher percentages. Next, we look at the use of farm inputs, especially productivity enhancing technologies. And there you can see, those farmers small who are not commercialized are using more of labor compared to other systems who are commercialized. Then when you look at issues to do with the use of inorganic fertilizer, you can see the commercialized systems are using more of that. The percentage of also using inorganic fertilizer, you can see the commercialized systems, be commercialized more or commercialized medium, they are all using purchased inputs. Same as chemical expenditures, per hectare, Kenya shillings, you can see Smaller farmers actually, non-commercial, they're almost using 0 on average. Yeah, just to move quickly through my presentation, I can see my time is running out. Then you can also look at tractor usage, mechanization. You can see commercialized systems, that 70% and above are using tractors. When you look at the non-commercialized more, 22%. Then in terms of productivity, generally you can see the commercialized are more productive in terms of output per hectare cultivated, and in terms of output per hectare operated. Then we move next to share of agricultural input derived from crops, and you can see most of the commercialized systems are using, are deriving most of the agricultural income from agriculture. Then same thing, here we are just, I think I presented this about the household commercialization index to show you that, the farms that we are saying are commercialized are really commercialized. They are selling most of their output to the markets. Then this is household producing commercial, industrial crops. You can see the non-commercialized, small scale, nothing, 6%. When the other commercial systems are producing more than 22%. Then next, use of resilience and sustainable land management practices. You see generally, I think I skipped that one, let me see, yes, now my system is working, yes. You can see basically the commercialized systems are using more of these sustainable land management practices without going into details. Then I move to my second question, which is about understanding the spillovers between the commercialized systems and the non-commercialized smallholder farmers. So here, I was just going to present the results, no econometrics, no nothing, the highlights. And what we find out was, first of all, we looked at whether the concentration of medium-scale farms is influencing non-commercialized farms around them. And point number one, you can see, yes, that is happening. High concentration of commercialized medium-scale farms increase non-commercialized smallholder farms' farm incomes. If you want, the percentages are down there. Then number two is a high concentration of commercialized stepping in, not stepping up, stepping in, medium-scale farms somehow reduce non-commercialized small-scale farms' non-farm incomes. We tried thinking through because that was contrary to our expectations, but our thoughts were like maybe the guys who are stepping in engaging in, their investment in ways that are not producing enough jobs for these people, or producing what we call poverty jobs, whereby they might not matter much, but it's still an issue that we are still considering. Then when next we looked at the effects of the concentration of medium-scale farms on commercialized small-scale farms' incomes. And here the same result, that concentration of medium-scale farms, especially stepping in farms, are increasing incomes of commercialized small-scale farms. And this, we have studies around this area. We show that, first of all, as I said, these families live together, so there's a lot of coping from each other. As I said, we attend the same various and all that. I see your crops doing well. I ask you, which seed are you using? And then you tell me, and I go and buy the same. How are you spacing your crops? Then when it comes to selling of your output, because of these medium-scale farms, we have so many buyers coming in, and they don't just buy from the medium, they are also buying from the small. So there are those synergies, which we are seeing from this study. Something that you've seen in Kenya, Nigeria, and Tanzania. Then effects of concentration of commercialized small farms, farms on small-scale farms income now in general, same results that, the concentration of these medium-scale farms are improving farm incomes of small other farmers around them. Then this is the summary of my presentation, the most important slide. Now you can remove your iPhones and you take a picture of this, because these are the gist of everything I was presenting. That land markets, both for rent and for purchase, are very important, especially when it comes to commercialization and promoting medium-scale farming in Kenya. And as we observed, medium-scale farms are relatively more commercialized and also more productive compared to small scale farms. And as you saw, medium-scale farms that are stepping up positively affect the farm incomes of nearby smallholder farmers. And as we saw, there is that negative relationship between medium-scale farms, non-farm income, and the concentration of medium-scale farms in these areas, in the villages where they are found. So in terms of policy suggestions, what goes to the policymakers? Yes, maybe somebody may think that doesn't relate to what I presented, but if you read the paper, you will see the connection between all this, like strengthening agricultural research and development and extension to develop and deploy outland saving technologies, innovation that can work, especially for those small farms. Yes, you have less than 1 hectare of land. What do you grow? Do you just grow maize, or do you look for high-value crops? We are challenging research to bring us those technologies which work for those kind of farms. Then land tenure systems, strengthening them. We saw that it's about land, and people are willing to go and rent, but people may not be free or may be scared of leasing their land for long term because of obvious reasons which we know. And because of that, I think you will see this in most places. Yeah? It has to be written clearly that, don't touch, it's not for sale. Then number 3 is repurposing public and private research, development, extension again, something like reputation. No. Here we are talking about our system that focus more on these commercial crops or maize, a lot of research, seeds around that area. But we forget about some other crops which can really do well in these very small farms. Then also prioritizing policy. I don't think I need to talk much about this. Everybody knows our policy, the environment, how important it is. And then infrastructure. So I think I'll stop there. I have 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Muyanga and his colleagues. Let me teach you how to do this, because we are used to doing ile kawaida. So there's one that I've been taught by young people. It is very interesting. I'm particularly interested in these stepping in farmers and how they affect the smallholder farmers around them. I think that's a very important observation, because then we could ask ourselves, how do we support these stepping in farmers, because maybe that becomes the genesis of transforming agriculture in rural areas. So I know we are short of time, so we'll just go straight ahead to the next presentation. Policy prioritization through value chain analysis, the case of aquaculture, and this is Dr. Lilian Kirimi. Dr. Lilian Kirimi will take us through that, and then after that we are going to Dr. Jackson Lagat for beef. Dr. Kirimi, karibu sana.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad that we are awake. Some of us were struggling to stay awake. I'm making this presentation on assessing the impact of PPVC reforms on the aquaculture value chain in Kenya on behalf of my colleagues from Tegemeo, John Olwande, and the other colleagues, Timothy, Tinashe, and Julius, from ANAPRI, which is the African Network of Agricultural Policy Research Institutes, and Tegemeo is a member of the network. This is going to be a very brief presentation because we have 2 presentations in one on PPVC. So in terms of the outline, I'll give you a quick background on PPVC methodology. I'm sure you're asking what is PPVC. We'll also give you evidence from that approach and the proposed reforms that came out from that approach for the aquaculture value chain. Then take you through what's the focus of today's presentation, and that is on tracking the reforms. And then I'll conclude with the next steps. So PPVC in full is policy prioritization through value chain analysis. And this approach combines different types of analysis, from the market to the farm to the value chain and economy-wide analysis. And it's a market-led approach that seeks to assist governments with evidence-based analysis that can help them to prioritize their policies and investments. For example, we've talked about ASDGs in Kenya today, a lot today, as well as the NIPES. We've heard about those. And if you look at ASDGs, these are a long list of value chains that the government has prioritized to meet different objectives. But we know there isn't enough money to fund all those priorities. So this process helps to narrow down to a shorter list of value chain that the government can focus on given the resources at hand. And in doing the prioritization, we also look at out of the interventions that we've come up with in a given value chain, what policies or public investments are most cost-effective at driving market-led inclusive agricultural transformation. And here is where we used economy-wide analysis to determine how much each of those interventions will contribute to GDP, to employment, poverty reduction, and even diet quality. And in this process, we seek to involve the private and public sector stakeholders right from the start. So PPVC, that the process approach we have used in Tegemeo has been done in 2 phases. So this evidence comes from the first phase, and then in the second phase is when we are tracking the reforms, what has happened. So this evidence from phase 1 indicates generally that there is growth in demand, very strong growth across most of the livestock value chains, including fish or aquaculture. But imports tend to fill or to meet that demand with depressed domestic production. And the analysis we did for fish identified that there are significant opportunities within this value chain that we can take advantage of by the year 2030. For example, the possibility of replacing the fish imports of more than 30 million USD per year. Possibility of even gaining 177 million USD per year towards the agri-food GDP, and bringing in additional jobs, about 64,000, and reducing the number of poor people by 200,000. And you agree with me that all these opportunities will require a combination of reforms, and those are some of the ones that I will be sharing and how we are tracking them. And this is happening even in a sector that faces key constraints, among them being the high feed costs. I think we've heard that before, that limits the competitiveness of the aquaculture production. And Kenya is known to be a net importer of most of the feed materials. They're expensive, and that the cost is also driven up by other transaction costs. We heard of the importance of lowering distribution costs even for the fertilizer cases. But we have also weak regulatory environment that affects the quality, availability, affordability of quality feed. And when we have such a problem, we tend to resort to an increased competition from imported feeds. Staying with the issue of costs, we looked at the different production systems for aquaculture. We looked at the ponds, pond culture, as well as cage farming. And we noted that feed costs contribute a lot in terms of the cost for these different production systems, whether it's at the initial stage or even in latter years. So during the establishment, feeds will account for about 50% of the costs, and in later years you find they contribute about 60 to 80% when you look at these bars here. So feed cost will constrain production, but also that cost of feeds increases with the intensification of production for both pond and cage culture. And what this means is that a competitive fish production industry will only be realized if feeds can be sourced at lower prices. So that we keep in mind even as we look at what interventions we proposed in the phase 1 of this PPVC work. There were a number of interventions, but I want to focus on the major ones. One was the need to enhance competitiveness of the feed sector through interventions such as duty waivers, import tariffs, and even fees, removal of fees. But lifting the ban on genetically modified products was also key for us. But not just lifting the ban, but developing regulations and standards that would support the importation and also eventual local production of the GM raw materials. But in the long term, we also think it's important to think about productivity-based growth in production of key crops that are important as raw materials in the feed industry. The other intervention was related to imports, ensuring a level playing field, given that most of the imports come very cheaply, and we wanted to see what could be done about that. I will tell you what we have observed. Also improving fish genetics, and as well as thinking about zoning for Lake Victoria. Now, those are some of the things that we got from the phase 1 of this work. And in phase 2, we are now tracking those reforms. Here I'm going to focus on 2 major ones, and then just mention a little bit about 2 more, and then we'll conclude. So one of the key reforms that we were focusing on, and we shared during our outreach meetings, was on the need for duty waivers. And some of the stakeholders lobbied the government for these waivers. And you can see from November 2021 to date, we have five windows of duty waivers. And most of these are focusing on the raw materials for feeds, the yellow maize, the soybean, and the rest of them. But what we note from these different periods of duty waiver is that we were not able to import even the set quotas for the different commodities. For example, only 53% of the white maize quota was imported, 46% for soybean, rather yellow maize, sorry about that, but only 9% of the soybean qualified for the duty waiver. And the reason we see some of these statistics, because most of these imports originated from the East African community and COMESA markets, and so the waiver was ineffective, because imports from the region, from these 2 areas, EAC and COMESA, do not qualify for the waiver, so they did not trigger the waiver. So that means that the local importers did not access global markets that would have seen them import perhaps the required quotas to get us to the levels of maize, yellow beans, and whatever else we needed. But apart from that, the other factors that were at play that made the waivers ineffective, first of all, was the caveat on the waiver that only non-GM raw materials should be imported. During these windows of duty waiver, the GM ban in Kenya was still on, and we also got into the Russia-Ukraine war, and we were disadvantaged because Ukraine is a major source of non-GM maize and soybeans. Of course, we know for some time the government vacated the ban on GMOs, but there are many court cases that have challenged that, and so the ban is still in place. Within this period, we also experienced a huge exchange rate shock, and at the same time, global market prices were also trending upwards. So although waivers were one of the reforms that we advocated for, and there was a move towards that, waivers were not effective because of some of these reasons, of these factors that we have mentioned. The other reform that we have been tracking is on taxation. Our proposal was to increase the taxation so that we can reduce the level of imports, because these imports were coming into Kenya very cheaply, particularly from China. The import tariff increased from 25 to 35%, and at the same time we had an excise duty imposed. And we see overall that these policies were effective. If you look at the level of imports, they have declined dramatically across that period. And it seems like those imports, as they declined, we had an increase in the cage culture production. But overall, we see a decline in the freshwater fish production, maybe because although this was happening, we also see a decline here in this bar. It should be orange. It's different from the red there. So the decline in the capture fisheries from the lake. So the fact that we had a decline, an increase in capture, in cage fisheries, that did not help, because we are also seeing a decline in the capture fish. So we had good policies that worked, and worked the way we expected. We had a decline in imports, perhaps making it easier for the local market to have space to meet the demand. But I think we need to do more to incentivize cage production, pond farming, and even look at what we can do about the capture fish. So those who are working, but you can see it's not that just one reform will work magic. We need to combine with other things, some that are in place, and others that we need to think through to make this aquaculture value chain perform better. The other reforms, it's on improving fish genetics for improved productivity. Not fully implemented, as you can expect. This would require investments in research, and that does not take place within a very short time. Funding for that remains low, but we are seeing availability of quality breeding stock. So although it remains a challenge, we have new farms getting into hatcheries, especially working closely with the Kenya Marine Fisheries Research Institute. So we have a move towards the right direction there. In terms of zoning of Lake Victoria, to deal with the issues of capture fish, a new spatial plan is being developed. But what next, given where we are coming from and where we need to go? I think we need to continue emphasizing the need for feed sector reforms. Cheaper animal feeds will ensure that producers are profitable and can compete comfortably with the imports. And we've seen that there is promising growth in cage culture, but that growth will be curtailed if feed costs don't decrease substantially. So we need to still think about that cost of feed. And we need to address those factors that hinder access to cheaper raw materials from the global markets. And key among them is the issue of lifting the ban. You know, we've talked about them here. We think this has been in the public discourse, although right now it's quiet. But we just want to emphasize this because we know that at current market prices, there is about 30% premium paid to access non-GM products. So if we had GM products, that would reduce our costs. And we think that even the imported fish we get from China, it's likely that that fish has been produced using GM raw materials. So there's need to provide a similar advantage to local producers. We continue also to say that it's important to allow the importation of semi-processed GM products like the crushed maize and other things like soybean cake, the distillers dried grains with solubose, a mouthful. I don't know exactly what that means, but we think that this is a less sensitive option because it's not likely to, we're not likely to see these items diverted to other uses. We also need to continue doing research on how to sustainably bring down the cost of feeds. Currently, Tegemeo is in partnership with Gatsby Africa to see how that can be done. As I conclude, as I finish, we need to strengthen regulatory environment to improve feeds quality, explore and prioritize, as well as support potential to produce soybean, sunflower, and cotton locally for the as raw materials for feeds. We've seen some counties go in the right direction towards the production of sunflower in particular. But you also need to address high cost of energy, transportation, and taxation. We are happy to note that zoning of Lake Victoria, there is the development of the spatial plan, but I think it's important that we prioritize finalization and implementation of the same, and emphasize that last but not least, research and development by government and other stakeholders is important in terms of alternative feed materials. We've heard about insects contributing quite a bit to feed in Kenya, but we need to bring such technologies to scale, as well as the need to improve genetics of the fish so that we can have better feed conversion and higher productivity. Thank you very much. I acknowledge these institutions that have contributed to this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kirimi. So again, we do the honors. So let's go. Wonderful. So a very interesting area, because actually aquaculture also has a lot of potential, particularly for young people in this country. If you ask me, I would say tax policy, I would say research on genetics. Let's look at what we can do here. Let's start there first, that's what I would say. But of course, I know you might have questions for Dr. Kirimi, but we are winding up. Dr. Jackson Langat, police prioritization through value chain analysis, a case study for beef. So Dr. Langat, my brother, karibu sana. 20 minutes. If you can spare a few minutes, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahiluta. I want to try that name. And welcome everyone for this second presentation on the policy prioritization. It's actually policy and investment prioritization through value chain analysis. So the value chain analysis informs what policies, what investments can be actioned to, of course, unlock some of the constraints within those value chains. So I acknowledge, let me do it at the start so that in case I forget. I acknowledge these institutions. AGRA was involved, IFPRI was involved, IFAP was involved, and of course, Tegemeo was one of the partners that were involved in this study. So, the methodological approach has already been taken care of by my colleagues, Dr. Lilian Kirimi. So I'll just dive into the beef value chain itself. So we started this by looking at what is the background of this value chain. Where are we starting from? And to start us up there, we realized that in our study that the production and consumption are almost at par, with very minimal exports that are very negligible here. So the parts there, the black parts there is production levels, and the continuous, is that light green, is consumption. So that is how we are as far as the beef value chain is concerned. And the second graph there is showing us what is the level of our per capita consumption. And given our income levels projected by the purchasing power parity there, the diamond levels there, we see that for Kenya, of course, the consumption level for us in terms of kilograms per person per year is starting at 8 kilograms per person per year. Of course, compared to the world's average of 6, we look like we are somewhere. But when you look at us against the other countries, you look at that there is still room for intake of more meat in terms of consumption. But given our income levels, this consumption is quite high, relatively. So, what about the prices of beef? Because this study was looking at the value chain analysis, then we look at the market to do partial equilibrium analysis, then we look at the economic weight by estimating a computational equilibrium modeling. So what are the prices? And we see that Kenyan beef prices is below the world market price, but has been rising. The data for Kenya is captured by the red line there. So it's rising, though it's looked low, but it's been consistently rising. But when you look at us with our regional partners or peers, then you look at after 2014, 2013 there, we are higher than everybody else. So the price is quite high up there. Of course, still below the world prices, but in the region, we are scoring high as far as the prices of beef are concerned. How is our production systems like? And we noted that within our Kenyan case, the production systems under beef value chain are feedlots, ranching, agropastoralism, and pastoralism. Of course, each of those contributing different proportion in terms of the number of livestock that they keep, in this case beef. So that 4% comes from the pastoralist, 54% of course come from the agro-pastoralist, 11% comes from the ranchers, and 1%, a mere 1% comes from the feedlots. And on the right-hand side there, the graph there, is trying to map some of the feedlots that we actually visited in the course of undertaking these studies. So the red ones are the existing ones. But of importance to note also is that the government also have marked out some of the areas, we'll come to that later on, that are potential for developing or promoting a feedlot system as far as beef value chain is concerned. My colleague talked a lot about the feeds. I want to skip that slide, but of importance to note is that the cost of the raw materials compared between Kenya and the other regions that they produce, between Kenya and the Black Seas, there is a whole difference of $175 against our price. So we are more expensive than the prices of those commodities at the Black Sea. Of course, the soybeans the same. To note also is the implication of taxation in that price. That quite a proportion of that price is contributed to by transportation cost, the charges at the port, and the tariffs that are imposed on these raw materials. So just for that. So after that then, painting a picture of where we are coming from. What then were the interventions or proposals as far as investment and policy that were considered in this study as ways of upgrading this value chain? Maybe it's important to note at this point that the choice of beef was because it presented an excellent opportunity for the transformation of the ag sector. So other value chains were picked for other factors, inclusivity among the others, but for beef, the factor that it ranked first on was the potential for transformation. So what then were the options that can push this value chain up as far as the transformation is concerned? And there are three interventions that were proposed. One of them was the grading system, where introduction of this grading of these livestock products, that they are classified based on their quality values, yeah? So quality of animals and enabling processing and export of premium products. Of course, this was targeted on unlocking the premium market of export and even within the country. So the second intervention was expansions of the feedlots. We'll see shortly from the analysis that there is quite some potential in going through the feedlot system in increasing our production as far as beef is concerned. So unlock the premium markets to enable tribe expand feedlot and also improve on the competitiveness of this feedlot, which has been curtailed again because of the high cost of feeds. So feeds again is coming in to counter progress towards the feedlot system. And then the last was working towards the productivity gains by working through the genetics, where we are saying that because the bigger portion of beef is coming from the pastoralism, that would be also the system that will feed the others with the genetics, the ranges and the feedlots. So we need also to work on improving the genetics within this pastoral system through some innovation so that they provide the raw materials that feed into the other system, of course, for enhanced productivity. So those were the considered intervention. What then were the outcomes that were projected to be generated through implementation of these proposed intervention? The first check was on the gross margins. And we realized that the gross margins will increase collectively, implementing the three interventions, will increase by 95% in the feedlot system compared to the pastoral system if we implement those interventions. If also we implement those interventions, the cross-breed pastoral system, the improved pastoral system, will increase in its gross margin by 72%. And the extensive ranges will also increase its profitability by 51%. If we implement the grading, if we implement the productivity gains, and if we implement also the other intervention. So that is the first check as far as the outcome of those interventions are concerned. The second outcome was assessing the changes in the production contribution across the beef production system. So this baseline is how the situation will look like at 2030 if we don't do anything on that beef value chain. So we are checking the situation, how it will look like with those interventions compared to not doing anything. Same time period, but one with intervention, another one without intervention. So we realize that the contribution in terms of the percentage contribution will mean that by 2030, if we don't do anything, 70% of our beef will be coming from the pastoral improved crossbreed, 75% will come from the local breed or indigenous breed, feedlot will contribute only 2%, and the extensive ranching will only contribute 6%. I'll just jump to the end. But these interventions are implemented incrementally. Okay? So with grading system alone, this is how the composition changed. Nothing changed about the pastoral local breed, nothing changed about the pastoral improved crossbreed, and nothing also changed about the other factors, the feedlot and the extensive ranching. But grading system plus the expansions of the feedlot, then the feedlot will start increasing its contribution by 5%. And if we do the three intervention, grading, feedlot, expansion, and productivity gain, then the feedlot will still keep at 5%, but 10% will come now from the pastoral improved crossbreed. What we also realize in the actual operations within the field is that most of the feedlots are established within the ranges. So there is a close correlation between the feedlot system and the ranching system. Okay. So that's about the volumes in terms of the production of beef. In terms of the value of this beef, how it will increase across the interventions. So the baseline again, if we just go normal without any augmented intervention, then the value of our beef industry, in quote, or subsector, will be 539 billion Kenya shillings by 2030. But there will be an increase by 3.2% if we implement a grading system. If we also implement a grading system plus the feedlot expansion, the increase will be 7.6%. And the same 7.6% will be realized across the three interventions. So those are about the value of that beef industry. In terms of the increased total value added across the interventions that are given, provided there, if we go on the way it is up to 2030, the increased value will be 123.1. Of course, the contribution of each of the production system is provided in there. But of importance to see is that the total increase after implementing the three intervention will be 18.4 billion Kenya shillings by 2030. That is the projection. And this will be the value added, which will mean it will also mean it translates to added GDP of the country by the same amount. So those were the markets, the partial equilibrium outcomes. What about the economy-wide? What happens then within the economy-wide with the multiplier effect and the other effects, spillover effect? And we are looking at three outcomes here. So we are looking at the GDP from the agri-food system gain, and this is in $1 million. The buffer reduction in terms of the number of 1,000 people that will be taken out of poverty, and then the number of jobs that will be created in terms of the number of 1,000 workers that will be taken out of unemployment. And we realize that all this, so the first bar here is showing the agri-food system GDP. So there will be an increase of 74.6 million US dollars in the GDP by 2030 if we implement the grading system. Of course, overall, after implementing the three upgrading or intervention strategies, the total increase will be 285 million US dollars in terms of the GDP of the agri-food system. That will be the increase. And the number of people that will be taken out of poverty will be 121,000 people that will be taken off poverty. And the last one is about the number of new jobs that will be created. There will be 42,000 more agri-food system jobs that will be created through that upgrading system. So through the multiplier effect. And that multiplier effect that is realizing that kind of an outcome, that outcome will spill over between the beef subsector, the non-beef agri sectors, because there will be spillover effect to the other sectors, and then the off-farm agri-food sectors that will also benefit from this growth. So what then are we saying as suggestions from these findings? We are saying that there is great opportunity, but productivity gains and targeted intervention need to improve competitiveness of the local supply. And what are the opportunities? The demand for beef is quite high. People are not about to stop eating beef. And of importance to note here is also that 77% of the red meat that is being consumed within the country is gotten through beef. 77% of the beef. And 17% of that beef or meat, that beef is gotten from imports of either live animals, mostly live animals from the neighboring countries. So there is quite some demand for beef. Number two is that there is currently low export volumes, which presents quite an opportunity in the sense that there is demand out there also for the beef product. What then are some of the constraints? The low productivity of the indigenous breeds. And low productivity, and also we practice what they call negative selection. When farmers want to sell their animals, they always pick which one? But since they want to get the big price, what do? They pick the best one. They pick the one which has good body conditions, which would have been also available for the breeding process. So they do that and they take off their system and they are remaining again to walk through the ones that they have. So that negative selection also is compounding the problem of the low productivity. And hence also the low carcass quality in terms of the quality of that meat. You cannot fetch a premium price for the meat that is gotten from that kind of a system. Land sizes also, I think there's been overemphasized the issue of land sizes, that they are being constrained. High feed prices also, I think it has been well said there. And so what then are the proposed interventions for going forward? So the grading system would be the way to go. Based on the age, the fat score, the body condition, among the other parameters, which would now lend your product also attractive to the niche markets. Finishing and fattening system, the feedlot system needs to be promoted because that is an area where most of those parameters that are bearing on the quality of these carcass can be well monitored through a feedlot system. Not to say that the others cannot improve. Lastly, the genetic gains and improved breeds in pastoralism would raise the margin profitability, but also it will make also the genetics available for the other production system. As I go to the end, what then are the interventions that are being implemented so far? This study has been undertaken in the past. And good to know that some of these actions, we've been part of it as the Tekemeo. We are grateful for that. So the National Animal Feed Strategy has been put in place, where we were also making a contribution to address the shortage, ensure sustainability of the supply of the systems that are producing these feeds, and then also the collaboration between the county and the national government to promote feasible options to address the major barriers of access to these feeds. That is one. Number two is the Livestock Animal Feed Regulation 2023. And this also was to regulate the aspects of quality. That it was to establish an authority that can now enforce quality issues, because besides the availability of this feed, the quality also was a concern. And this regulation came into being to ensure that. And then the right management and pastoralism strategy also has come into being with specific objectives of instituting measures to regulate or to increase rangeland health for sustainable productivity of these feed products. So among the others, like revitalizing the pastoralism production system. It was interesting today, as I checked the news in the morning, this is what I got. This was what happened yesterday in Mombasa. The director of livestock was giving a presser to establish 450 feedlots to address feed shortage in ASAL counties. So I think there's been some action there. Maybe what we just need to do is to keep monitoring and keep negotiating, discussing, and informing one another with the stakeholders, so that whatever step that is being taken is informed by evidence, is guided by data that is available, and also it's going to give the better gain or the maximum gain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Langat. So again, let's give him a hearty clap. Let's go. Yeah, some people got lost there. So yes, we're out of time. So what you're going to do now is I'll call upon the four presenters, Dr. Kamau, Prof. Muyanga, Dr. Kirimi, and Dr. Lagat. Could you please come up? Very briefly, we are supposed to take 20 minutes, but I think we will take like 10. I know maybe people have questions from the four different presentations. let's maybe pick the most urgent questions or commentary that we'd like to hear from the presenter. So please, Dr. Kiremi, Professor Muyanga, Dr. Kamau, and Dr. Lagat. So again, we had very interesting presentations from the 4 experts. Of course, they are presenting on behalf of the colleagues I've been working with, and they have given us quite a bit to chew on. Like they have said, of course, they would have taken a lot more time if they were to go deep into their presentations. So I believe we got the headlines. But then from the headlines, I do think we picked a few things that we could ask about, maybe something that was not clear or a question that is really burning. So if we could go, and I hope, Dr. Gad, I hope there is someone with a mic, yes, so that we can go let's go in order of their presentation so that we also move fast. So from Dr. Kamau, to Professor Muyanga, to Dr. Kirimi, and Dr. Lagat. Yeah, please.
Okay, I'm Peterson Mwangi from Karo. I've been entertained by the many presentations that have been done, and I appreciate all the presenters. Now, there is one thing that I've noted, but okay, it also it was part of also the morning presentation that we are talking so much on the economic part of it, which is right. I'm not refusing. And fortunately, we covered the political aspect, the sphere. But most of the times when we are presenting or when we are answering the questions, I think there's one dynamic which is missing. And I don't know how to put it in a way that it's also appreciated. That the farmer is a social, I don't know to say a social animal, but the social aspects of the farmer, the socio-cultural attributes, the attitude, the preference, the perception, and the way of life is mainly, in most cases, presented during the workshop at the panel level, where people explain farmers felt this, they were excited, or they were thinking of this. But we have less of documentation of that. Here we are talking more of figures and all that, but if we could even capture the qualitative aspects of all this presentation, it adds more weight. Because like now, when the willingness to pay, you see, there are other social attributes that make a person, apart from the economic angle, to go into that. I think is generally all the presentation, or most of the presentation, I would like to bring that aspect. We talk, the political angle brought kind of a similar feeling of what I was thinking, but now we have the social, the anthropological issues, the attitude, the perception of life of the farmer. Does it contribute? The question is, to what extent does it contribute to policy formation? Thank you.
Thank you, Peterson. I think that's a very important question, and I'm happy we are talking on behalf of farmers. I really appreciate that. It's also, yes, the qualitative aspect is something that, of course, we need to see a lot more of, and I do believe the experts will address themselves to that. So let's do this so that we move. Let's ask all the questions. I think if we pick like about 6 to 8 questions, we should be good. Then the presenters will pick the questions that are relevant to them. But please be as brief as possible.
May I just do my question? So please, so my name is Frank Rasche, and I'm working for the IITA Excellence in Agronomy Initiative here in Nairobi as a soil health specialist. I was interested in the talk by Dr. Milou, and I was just wondering what kind of benefits small-scale farmers do have. You said that there is an increase in income, but what is the real function here behind that? Well, it's access to knowledge, markets, or what are the baselines of that? And a second part of my question would relate to the stepping in model, which is very interesting actually. But I was just wondering if there are also challenges if medium-scale farmers want to purchase land, want to rent land. Is there not a risk of a scattering of the land size, though farmers might have a 50 hectares farm, but still the plots are not connected, and that might also pose challenges for these medium-scale farmers. And when you think about the development of medium-scale farmers or large-scale farmers in the future, would that also be a model to consolidate small-scale farmers into larger entities, just to make their systems more efficient, effective in terms of knowledge implementation, technology implementation, just to build their local economy through a consolidation? Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks. I'm here. I have two questions. One to Dr. Kamau. You have talked about political economy factors, and you have also given us the actors and the power relationship. How do we balance so that everybody is happy in the terms of policy formulation? The second question is to Dr. Muyanga. In view of changing land sizes as well as land tenure system, where is the space of urban agriculture in the food transformation system, where land has become scarce and the production system has really changed? Do we need to redefine what is small scale or medium scale?
Thank you very much. Next question.
Yeah, mine was a quick one. Thank you so much for the good presentations. My name is Dr. Kahareri. I'm studying in for the Director of Livestock Policy, Research and Regulations. I like the presentations, especially when we talk about economics, because I know when the farmers get the money, everything else falls in place, including genetics improvement and everything else. When you showed us the figures, it showed that we have serious demand. We are actually having shortage of beef, and we are even importing beef. But when you again go, and if you are to attempt to also draw a curve showing the counties that are most affected by poverty, I'm sure you realize that the livestock producing counties, those communities are also living with the highest poverty levels. So I think it is important for the study, or maybe you clarify where we got this link, because in economics we understand the laws of demands and supply and the impacts they have on the prices. Number two, the many economics models that have been given, we all know that there is the aspect of economics of scales, and the many interventions that we are giving to the pastoral communities, who are the main livestock producers, are currently disintegrated because they are not being given in an arrangement like cooperatives or even community sort of an arrangement. So in these studies, do we have, in the way forwards that I've seen, I don't think we have had any initiatives to do with organizing our farming systems into arrangements that are more sustainable. Because if you look at most interventions, even by government, they are driven on goodies or even subsidies that are probably, if you look critically, could be not sustainable. Maybe you can clarify that. Thanks.
Dr. Kahariri, any other question? Yes, here.
Just a small one, generally. So, GMO, Jackson and Lillian, in the absence of relaxation of GMO bans, what will be the feasible alternative? Do you have maybe some idea? Thanks.
I think that's it. Oh, there's one there. We can put that as the last question. The lady in red.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, presenters, for very informative presentations. I'll just be brief. The main issue around is feed for both fish and livestock. There are issues around food safety. So I don't know how, if your studies explode, because it's not just the composition and cost, but we have food safety issues that need to be taken into account, and that also links to the question Professor has asked on what is the alternative to non-GMO sources of food for both the fish and animals. Secondly, in regard to the presentation on policy, who are the largest policy brokers? When you did the mapping, Mercy, where would we get the highest gains by lobbying to which group along the value chain node? And then lastly, the question of the medium-sized farmers, or rather farms, that are able to influence the smallholders. We recognize that land fragmentation has been very high. So we have a growth in the smallholder farmers. We have very few medium-scale farmers in the country. And then we have large. So I don't know if it is possible to see if you had the opportunity to link what was the influence of the large to the medium, and what is then also these few medium-scale farmers, because the quantum has been going down from 1963 significantly. So did you measure that influence, even as you look at the issues of the ones who step in? What was it that was making, is it the technology, is it they are using, producing high-value crops? Because again, when it comes to the farm size, it affects the level of mechanization, for instance, and the choice of crop or livestock that you're going to have. I don't know if that was a treatment you had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we stop the questions there. Unfortunately, a number of questions I had have also been picked, so I will not repeat. But I'm going to ask Dr. Lanyati, you talked about multiplier, but I don't know whether you looked at the leather aspects of the beef industry. So maybe you could just briefly touch on that. But now, since what I have been asked by the different people who ask questions, I will not repeat. I'll let our experts now address the questions as they have come, and let's take the shortest time possible. Obviously, we continue to engage for the rest of the evening and tomorrow and even after this workshop. So we can start with Dr. Kamal. If you don't, we can, you good?
Thank you for those very relevant questions. I'll not go in order in which they came, but I'll just maybe address what I thought I could based on what I presented today. I think I agree with what Patterson said. I think that is relevant, and I think in Tegemeo we may be accused severally of being concentrated on the economic aspects, but I think that point is well taken. In terms of how to balance everybody's interests and to make everybody happy, probably we'll never all be happy, but from our understanding of what we found, I think having strong mediating mechanisms in those value chains, having strong farmer associations, and having farmers who are horizontally integrated. Remember in the beef value chain, we said pastoralists form the majority in the beef value chain, but they are not integrated in any way, which makes the power in that value chain to be centered on brokers and other agents who are on that value chain. So strong associations will, and the moderator here is agreeing because he is in KEMAF, and I think that's the one way to ensure that farmers are really benefiting. Economic power to smallholder farmers, collective action, still going back to that idea of having strong associations, and I think also toning down political interference. We talked about interference in bureaucracies. If we could just allow the bureaucracies to act, they would act faster and in the interest of all. However, we found that there is political interference and interests. So if and then there's overlaps in terms of responsibilities, who's in charge of the health, who's in charge of that, and nobody wants to give way. So that idea of not having overlapping responsibilities would make us have policies and strategies implemented faster and for the benefit of all if they interfere. Then we also said that you will note that whenever we have what we called horizontal settlements in the political system, like we're having now, it is stalls all other important and priority bills that may be important, that are not may be important for Kenyans and in fact for the ag sector. So I think we need to be aware and tone down that. I know that is politics, and politics is about settlements, but that is stalling a lot of policies. It happens, it's happening now, it happened in the previous government during the BPI, it happened in Kibaki era. So you can see that our interest and the interest of all get affected. Where are the largest gains? Who, you know, that question, I wouldn't say where the government would lobby, but in terms of where the largest, where we will get the largest gains is where we find, if we think about the smallholder farmers. So I think in the livestock, when we think about those farmers, the ones who are majority, my colleague Jackson presented the beef value chain. We said there's a lot of potential there, but and so I think that's where we have, but there are many issues there, both economically, but I think in the political economy, there's a lot of things happening there. So there'd be a lot of big gains there in terms of revenues, but also for the pastoralists themselves. In the fruits and value chain, we have smallholders together with large exporters. I think the government interventions, of course there's revenue, so you think about large exporters, but those already know how to lobby and mediate for themselves. So if you're thinking about the ones who do not know, those are the smallholder farmers who are affected by so many, the EU regulations and others. So if you think of that as well. In sorghum, we have one big player and another one in Nakuru and other smaller ones. Of course, there's a lot of benefit there from the government in terms of revenue collection or tax collection. So there, the government being the big winner. I don't know. There is, you know, so I wouldn't know. Really, the sorghum value chain is a bit tricky given that the farmers are not that strong, but the government is benefiting a lot on the country in terms of revenue collection, tax collection, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Kamau. So we've had, you know, the sweet spot really, we have to keep looking for that sweet spot. It's good that Tegemeo can tell us this is where most of the interests are. But of course, as people who are serving the public, for instance, in my case, serving the farmers of this country, you know, where do we need to build the agency for the farmers so that they can better negotiate? So I think we go to Dr. Kirimi.
Yeah, thank you. I'll focus on the question on GMO. With the ban in place, what can we do? I think there are three things we can do. In the short term, we can take advantage of the duty waivers. Currently, we have a duty waiver in place until next year, and we can be able to import non-GM, maize, soybean, even from outside EAC and COMESA, because that way the imports will attract a waiver, come into the country at lower prices, and hopefully that will trickle down to lower feeds. So that in the short term. And maybe also, second thing in the short term, maybe medium term, look at the alternative raw materials that can go into feeds. I think we've seen quite a bit of push towards the use of insects and other kind of materials. In the maybe short term, whatever is working can be brought up to scale, and even more maybe research done into that. But I think in the long term, we also need to develop value chains that can support the feed industries, things like sunflower, cotton, soybean. And we see some push towards that. Some counties like Nakuru and Siaya are prioritizing sunflower, and hopefully that's the way to go so that we can have the raw materials to go into feed production. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, very great question. I don't know whether I'll meet them with the equally satisfying answers. The one from Patterson Mwangi on the social animal and all that, yes. We understand the importance of qualitative studies and all that. And most of the times when we do these studies, we collect the quantitative and then we go back, for those focus group discussions, key informants, to get more qualitative information to fill the gaps. So we do that most of the times, but some other times due to budgets reasons, we might not be able to do that. Then there was a question from Van Kash. I don't know whether I got your name correctly. Yeah, we don't have like a baseline. This was basically a cross-sectional kind of survey that we did, whereby we collected the quantitative data and also now elicited more information about how these households were benefiting from, the stepping in medium-scale farms. And as I mentioned, in terms of technologies, new technologies coming in, you see your neighbor using it and you also adopt it. Markets, I talked about that, and also employment. So these are some of the spirit of us, and also learning more about high-value crops, as you said. Then another little bit very political one about stepping in and competition for land. That's very political, but evidence from Zambia by Jake has shown that land, rental markets, and even purchases transfer land from less efficient farmers to more efficient. So in totality, the national emissions goes up. But the question is, how do we deal with this guy who is inefficient and land is being taken from him? That's a little bit political, so I don't want to get there. Then the last one that I will deal with is about urban agriculture. And I will tell a story about this. First of all, we are challenging, people in labs and research to come up with technologies that can work around the cities. I've seen hydroponics, and people, normally refer it to as, a revolution. But so far, I just see them growing lettuce. I don't know whether you are going to be feeding our cities the lettuce only, or you are going to be doing other things for hydroponics. That's something I don't know. And then the final one is when I joined Tegemeo in 2004. Urban agriculture, everybody was talking about urban agriculture, and I wrote a concept note. I wanted to develop a proposal around that. And then one of our researchers, a senior one, not Paul Ngamba was there then, but another one, asked me how many people are being fed by urban agriculture. Go to your national statistics. And it was like 1%. He was like, Moyanga, why do you go for 1%? Go for the bigger picture. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I can't recall exactly the person who asked the question, but all the same, I have the question. So the question, okay, it was more of a comment that it's like pastoralism is is moving together with poverty, and you find most of the persons that are inhabiting those environments that pastoralism is practiced, they are quite poor, yeah? And whether we did anything, in terms of the growth in incomes and the employment and the GDP, it was economy-wide. We did not disaggregate to those specific areas that are doing which production system. It was now feeding into the entire economic system. But it's a very interesting idea to pursue. And on number 2, on intervention for pastoralism that is sustainable for the environment, I think time was not enough to speak on the specific and unique interventions that are proposed to each of the systems. So the idea was that the peak source of the genetics in the beef industry will be from the pastoralist system, because those are the guys who control the numbers as far as those animals are concerned. And the way to up their genetics was through supplying them with not AI service, the traditional AI service as we know, but supplying them with bulls so that they improve their breeds over time of improved breeds. So there are those specifics in the final details of the report, but we could not divulge everything in such kind of a forum. So there were such kind of ways of doing it. And even in the many strategies that have been developed, I remember we validated in this very same hotel the National Animal Identification and Traceability Strategy, which was more of also, we can track these animals where they are coming from so that they can also assist in terms of tracing back in this case of there is an issue. And this has come up with many concerns, like for example, we've lost some of the breeds that we had. Like somebody was telling us, there used to be a Nandi Cebu as a breed, but we cannot find it now because we've carelessly crossbred these animals until we lost those genetics. So that kind of system, I think it's under development, and we hope it will deliver the desired results. The issue of leather as part of the byproducts from beef industry, we might not have gone there largely, but it's something to also consider, because we are also following up on this. The initial was more of following beef as a product that is needed for consumption. But in terms of valuing that industry, yes, I'm sure, but in terms of trying to see what are the key things on the leather industry that would need to be followed up on, maybe that is an area that we need to explore more. Thank you very much. Maybe small on the issue of feed. There was somebody from Akvema here, and in terms of the quality, somebody said the issue of quality of feeds, that is not only about the availability, but the quality of it. And I think in a discussion on a feed discussion like this, the group was of the feeling that self-regulation may be the real low-hanging fruit in assuring on quality issues, where the farmers are trained and informed to be aware of what they are looking for in the feed, so that they are the ones to determine or to judge whether the food is of high quality, rather than being a supply side kind of a thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, our presenters. I appreciate your contribution, and thank you to the people who have asked the questions. On behalf of all of us, I hope that your question has been answered. So my role is to say what Tegemeo has done is what Tegemeo should be doing. I mean, you've brought all these people together to challenge us, to inspire us to think in the ways in which you've been challenged by these presenters. I believe that there are different actors in this room. There are people from government. I've heard Dr. Kahariri. I don't know whether Dr. Lagat is here from Nandi. So the policymakers are here. Civil society is here. Academic research institutions are here. I believe business is here. And that is really the idea for these presentations, so that we are challenged. We start thinking about how do we, if you look at Dr. Kamau's presentation, how do we achieve what is called Pareto optimality, I think, if I remember my grad school work well. How do we achieve the sweet spot for everyone? Because each actor in the chain is looking for their interest. But then for the common good, really, how do we ensure that we achieve common good in policy making? Dr. Langat and Dr. Kiremi have challenged us on these case studies. For sure, like I said, there is immense potential in aquaculture, in fisheries in this country. We are barely scratching the surface. Maybe Dr. Kiremi, like I was saying, I would want us to focus more internally. Because there is a lot we can do internally, even without looking at the GMOs, which is a topic that I don't want to get started on. There's a lot that we can do in terms of tax policy, in terms of research locally, in terms of supporting, targeted support to young people and women who can take up these opportunities. What Dr. Kahariri talked about poverty and the pastoralist counties also, I think that's why I was asking Dr. Langat about the leather industry, because they also go hand in hand. And if you remember the statistics he gave us, 77%, really there's also so much potential, and we are bringing in beef into Kenya, while there is so much we can do to produce that. Then stepping in and stepping out, these are terminologies I did not know about. Professor Muyanga, thank you very much. But like I said again, if the stepping in farmers are going to affect the smallholder farmers positively, where on-farm incomes are concerned, I think that is something we should look at. How do we target research and support, like extension, just like you said, into these stepping in farmers, so that the other farmers can learn from them, and then generally in the long run you enhance production and productivity. I think my friend over there asked about all these smallholder farmers and consolidation, and as much as, Prof, you don't want to address the politics, honestly, in the long run, we have to hold the bull by the horns and talk about land fragmentation and talk about what we need to do in order to transform really our agriculture, so that we don't start with strategy for revitalization of agriculture, SRA, which really brought the sector from the doldrums to what really we have now, the ASCOs of this world and all the work that was done during the Kibaki government. I think there are things that we need to address so that we transform the sector that is carrying most of these countries' population. And that is the only way to really also achieve the imperatives in better. There's a lot more we can do, my friends, but of course we are out of time. Dr. Gamba, I think I'll hand it over to you. And someone needs to teach us another way to appreciate, another clap, so that we can appreciate these experts. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you. That was a very stimulating session. The trouble with stimulating sessions is that we go overboard, and that's exactly what has happened. So, I want to ask your indulgence, request your indulgence actually. We have tea. We are supposed to be having tea now. My request is that we ask Nancy and her team to be upcoming, so that we just finish with that session, and when we break for tea and also just go home. Is that suggestion carried? But in the meantime, I know you've been sitting for a very long time, so as Nancy and her team gets here, please, may I request you to stand up? There are people who do energizers. I'm not very good at that one. Yeah, yeah. Okay. for me, is just an exercise. You can touch your head, touch your shoulder, touch your knees, and if you can manage, touch your toes. Okay? The only difference is that you start slowly, then you go ahead. Okay? Is the instruction correct? Yes. Okay, you start slowly, then you go 3 times. Okay? All right, let's go. Let's begin. I'm not sure you're touching your knees. I'm not sure you're touching your knees, but that is good enough. So for this particular session, let me invite Nancy. I know we are short of time, but I'm also told the panelists are a little bit thin, so we'll probably do it in the next 20 minutes and then we are done, right? So Nancy, please.
So thank you very much. I'll request Anastasia and Kevin to join me. We apologize. I think John Macharia had to leave. And in the interest of time, I'll give Kennedy an opportunity to introduce himself, and then similarly, I'll ask Anastasia. I don't know, no, you use this one, then Anastasia.
Yeah, good evening. It's evening. Yeah, my name is Kennedy Okech. I work for GIZ in a project called, a global project called Sustainable Agricultural Systems and Policies. Agriculture, economy, and financial advisor. Thank you.
Good evening all. I'm Anastasia Kivuva from the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development in the State Department for Agriculture, currently working under the National Agriculture Value Chain Development Project. I'm the National Value Chain Development Lead. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm Nancy Laibuni. I work with the Council of Economic Advisors, but in my previous role I was at KIPRA, so I'm familiar with quite a number of colleagues here. So very quickly, we'll ask Anastasia to give us a highlight of the National Value Chain Project. They have done quite a bit, and it's a build-up to 2 previous World Bank projects, the KSAP and the NAGRIC, which most of us either participated in as researchers or were stakeholders. And we are asking Anastasia to tell us what investments are needed to promote equitable and inclusive agricultural value chain development that ensures that we leave no woman behind and we enable the participation of youth. So we are saying we want to make agriculture more accessible, more fashionable, and more people to participate. So we're asking her to give us highlights of what she thinks based on the experience of the way they have organized the current project, what would be these 2 actors' roles, and what specific investments need to be made to ensure that their participation is felt and is inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. The National Agriculture Value Chain Development Project, known as NABCDP, it's a 5-year project which became effective 2022. It's building on the previous project, that's National Agricultural Inclusive Growth Project and Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project. The main objective of this is to commercialize agriculture and also ensure market participation by the farmers. One of the key targets we are looking at is to ensure that women and youth participate in more than 50% as we achieve our objective. And we are looking at interventions which will lead to commercialization of agriculture in the country, especially the small-scale farmers. The very first step before I come to the women and youth intervention was to prioritize the value chains. The ones we are working with the 16 value chains, and then we are working in 34 counties. The 34 the 33 counties drawn across the country. Then we also have Nairobi and Mombasa piloting urban food systems, safe food in the urban areas. The first point of intervention was to understand the value chains. What are the pain points in these value chains and what interventions are expected? For NAPCDP, we are both in hardware interventions and also in capacity building. For women, before we come to the interventions, what are the factors that have meant the participation of women and youth unequal in the agriculture sector? One of them is the time women have to participate in this. Remember, in our social, cultural, economic status, the women do not have equal access to productive resources. Could it be the land? Could it be the finances when you're accessing the finance? And also the time to do the work. The other issue is the workload. Women tend to have more workload around the community. And also, we are coming from a situation where, when it comes to leadership, especially in the areas where are more male-dominated, like, let me give an example. For those of us who come from coffee and tea zone areas, when we go to these cooperatives, what are the percentage of women and youth in leadership? You find it very low. Maybe out of the 9 management members, in some cooperatives it's as low as 1. In others, we found is 0. So if women cannot sit and youth cannot sit in the management committee, then when it comes to decisions, they are not likely to voice their issues well. The other issue is the issue of information. Do youth and women have equal access to information? Whether in production, whether in marketing, and it gets worse as we move up the value chains towards the marketing, mainly because women and youth may not be exposed, or maybe they don't have resources to participate in some of the key issues. So what are the interventions we are looking at to make it more, to make women and youth participate more? We are looking at technologies and innovations which are friendly to both women and also where youth can embrace. We are looking at technologies where youth really don't have to look at agriculture as a dirty job, where they can look at agriculture as like another white-collar job. If it's an issue of e-commerce, we are looking at how do we bring a platform where producers can market online, where producers have an e-commerce platform, and we are enticing the youth to take up an active role in this. And the other area of intervention we are looking at is the issue of intervention where we can improve women, get an access to productive resources, as I mentioned earlier on, and part of this is bringing women to participate in the associations and in cooperatives. Another way we are encouraging this, or we are intervening, we've just mentioned that women have a lot of workload, they have a high workload, they don't have a lot of time. When it comes to the cooperatives, can we have aggregation centers nearer to the women? Nearer to the producers, as opposed to where women have to walk or they have to travel several kilometers just to do the aggregation. And finally, we are also looking at the issues of coming up with the products where women have, and youth have kind of an affirmative action. We're also coming up with associations, cooperatives, which are women and youth heavy, so that they have an advantage in getting to the management. And finally, most of us in this room are researchers. Yes, we have seen a lot of improvement in the recent past, but we still don't have adequate research which gives us data which is specific to women and youth. There is a gap, and so if we get more of this, if we do more research and the research is integrated into youth and women, then we'll have targeted interventions for these two categories. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is well elaborated. We appreciate the role that your project is making towards ensuring that we leave nobody behind. Kennedy, you've heard a lot about value chains today. And even when you listen or look at our bottom-up economic agenda, our approach or the way we hope to implement it is through a value chain approach. So most of the interventions that we have lined up in the better are following the same approach. So how then do you think you can give us some insights on what would be the best practices to ensure that we promote sustainability of agricultural value chains?
Okay. Thank you for that question. So what I'd like to say is that as GIZ, of late we are really moving away from implementing projects which are value chain oriented. We are moving more towards a food system approach. And so, because currently, like I think in our cluster, agricultural cluster, we have very few value chain projects. Yes, they are there, but there are not many, but we are moving more towards food system approach. But be that as it may, I think anytime we are implementing a value chain project, we have two considerations, and we always look at the environmental side and the equity consideration. I will not speak so much on the environmental side because I can see there's a lot of soil scientists here, and even from the earlier discussion, I'm sure there's a lot of things, a lot of discussion that went along issues to do with input subsidy and soil health. But on equity consideration, and just from looking at the projects that GIZ has implemented for a long time, I think since 1963, is that projects that have been sustainable, the value chain project, is that they had some few outstanding consideration. So, like, first of all, market access is very important. So projects that have continued even beyond GIZ is that the market has been sticky. So even when GIZ has left, the farmers have continued to be able to access the market and to be able to access information. Another important thing is, like, for example, what we are doing in Western Kenya is that we are providing some, supporting the county government in developing policies, especially land use policies. And like my colleague has said that some of the policies that we have, they do not really support women and youth to be able to participate effectively in agriculture. And even where they are participating at the node that is more unskilled labor, or where real income does not come through. So we are supporting the counties in developing land leasing guidelines. And the beauty of these land leasing guidelines is that they can easily be used as a contract. And so even accessing finance from a financial institution is easy. So issues of contract are very important, especially when you are dealing with youth and gender. The other thing is that other value chain projects that have really succeeded is where there is standardization and certification in terms of the product. So this does not necessarily mean that for every product that you have, you must have a certification process or a legal document, but it's just having clarity between what the market needs and what the farmers are producing. The other thing is linkage to financial institution. So anytime we start a project, we try as much as possible to ensure that the farmers are able to be linked to a financial institution, and even not just linkage, but in terms of also training, developing their capacity, financial literacy, and even going ahead and trying to negotiate good loan products for the customer. And I'm sure most of you might not know, you can actually negotiate your interest rates or to the farmers that you are supporting, especially if you have a memorandum of understanding. So in a nutshell, I'll say those are some of the best practices that have really sustained the project that GIZ has implemented within the value chain.
Thank you very much. So we have heard that farmers need to get together as groups, collectives in whatever form are our main agency that we shall use to be able to ensure that we have value chains that work. We also have had several things around making sure that you make your value chain inclusive, provide products and services that allow everyone to participate. So as I close this panel, I will ask the panelists to give us one last take-home message that they want us to take away from the many messages we've had this morning and the very many policy pronouncements that we have had and recommendations that they would say would be their take-home to ensure that we transform our value chains and we transform the agricultural sector in Kenya. I start with Anastasia.
Okay. I'm going to give two. It is really clear that policies are key when it comes to the development of these value chains. And in the past, we've seen some policies which have actually worked negative towards the development of certain value chains, and we've seen other policies which have worked very well and they've given positive results. So whatever we do, let's bear in mind that policies are very key. Secondly, targeted interventions are very, very important, especially when you target along the value chains. If I'm to give an example, it's the just concluded Nanawi project. The benefit cost analysis was about 4.8. That we don't get much of such a figure when it comes to projects, but I believe it was mainly because most of the interventions were targeted. Thank you.
Yeah. So on my side, what I'd like to say is that, for example, currently we are supporting input subsidy policy framework that the Ministry of Agriculture is developing, and also Agriculture Development Financing Act, so like a fund. But last week we had like a stakeholders engagement, and the beauty of this is that as much as we try to be as inclusive as possible, is that we also realize that not all of us can be winners. So there will always be winners, and I don't want to say losers, but the feeling I got like from the private sector, there was a lot, they have always complained about the issue of being crowded out, which is true, but also look at it also from the government side. The government is also concerned about issues to do with food security, okay? So sometimes the measure might not really go your way all the time. But I think the most important thing is to try as much as possible to be inclusive, because the problems that we are dealing with are complex. So we cannot just sort one issue and leave the rest. We have to try and go down to the root cause of the issue. And then on the farmer side, I think farmers are providing us a lot of services, just apart from food. So I think we also need to really to think critically. How can we provide some payment for the services that they are providing? So I think in future we really need to think about whatever where we are implementing the value chains that we are doing, not just increasing the farmer's income, but also looking at other services that they are providing. Could it be soil conservation? Can we be able to provide a payment for that service? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The end of our panel, I would just like to reiterate that as on behalf of the Council, we are honored to have been invited to participate. We are available to support. We are looking to ensure that most of the policies that we implement in this country are informed by evidence, so we are open to discussion, to research, to outputs, and to engage. And I would like to reiterate that our most high priorities right now is to ensure that we reduce the cost of living, make it affordable for all Kenyans. We also want to ensure that we expand the revenue base. We want everyone to participate because we believe everyone has an ability and can participate equally, and we can achieve a win-win, both with the private sector and government working in partnership. We also want to ensure that we increase our foreign exchange, and that's why we are promoting our exports. We want to create jobs and ensure that we have inclusive growth. So in a nutshell, we want to say the bottom-up economic agenda is ensuring that nobody is left behind and everyone participates in building our country together. So thank you very much, and thank you very much, Anastasia and Kennedy, for being patient. We appreciate your insights.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Don't they deserve better than that? They do. So please, if you are going to do anything, you would have been doing it standing. I understand they call it standing ovation. I don't know if it's the clapping as you stand or you stand up for the people you are clapping for. But I think we really appreciate Nancy and the team for that tremendous job and bringing us back on track. I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for bearing with us and really listening to some of these very stimulating discussions that we have had. Very interesting findings that are really, really informative for policy purposes. We want to bring it to a close so that tomorrow morning we can be here early. But in the meantime, don't forget the tea is served and it was for you. So as you go on your way out, please take your tea. Normally there are in-house announcements. Is there any housekeeping issue, John? If there's no housekeeping issue, then I'm happy to inform you that tea is served. And please, let's congregate tomorrow morning and we can start the program on time so that we can finish. Tomorrow I know is almost like half day, so we'll try to move it as fast as possible. Otherwise, we thank you very much and appreciate your being here with us all this time. Please enjoy your evening and let's meet tomorrow morning after you have taken your tea. Thank you very much and God bless.